Ever since Jeep Philippines brought in the Wrangler locally, it's become one of the brand's top-selling vehicles. And why wouldn't it be? It looks like it can take on just about anything you throw at it. But it's also become a little bit too common for some people. So what if you want a Jeep that has, well, the same capabilities and a more in-your-face design and attitude? Well, I present to you this, the Gladiator. Now this is a Jeep after all, so it comes studded with a lot of Easter eggs. So you have one by the windshield, by the cowl of the windshield, on the rims, and over at the back by the tailgate too. So it does have a lot of old school features. So you have the round headlights and the classic 7-slotted grille along with its boxy and upright shape. But of course, just because it looks old school doesn't mean it's totally old school, because you get LED lighting all around. You have LED daytime running lights, LED headlights, and even LED brake lights. Now this is the Rubicon model, so you get some off-road goodies here and there. You get these tow hooks, exposed tow hooks by the front bumper. You get Fox shocks on every corner of the wheel, mud terrain tires, and these unique 17-inch alloy wheels. Now when you look at the Gladiator, it literally looks like a Wrangler with a pickup bed stuck over at the back. And well, in some cases that is pretty true, because even the rear doors look like they came straight from the Wrangler Unlimited, the 5-door model. And bear in mind that the Gladiator is almost a meter longer than the already sizable Wrangler Unlimited, so take a little bit more caution when you're parking in tight parking spaces. Now, it wouldn't be a pickup review if we didn't take a look at the bed, and this particular feature caught my attention. So if luxury cars have soft closing doors, this has a soft opening tailgate, so it doesn't just slam open. Now, do keep in mind that the Gladiator is more of a lifestyle pickup kind of thing rather than a heavy-duty hauler. So the bed isn't one of the biggest in its class. And if you've noticed, it's also on the shallow side. So loading up tall items, well, that's not really an option. However, if your items are lengthwise, well, maybe you'll have less of a problem because the bed still measures over 1.5 meters long. Also, since I mentioned that it's more of a lifestyle kind of pickup, the payload capacity isn't particularly high. It's just a little over 540 kilograms. Now, for the back of the Gladiator, well, it's what you'd expect from a pickup. And there's a clever little trim piece here that hides the reverse camera because, well, there's nowhere else to put it, really. And just like at the front, you have a pair of tow hooks here at the back to go along. Now for the name, Gladiator, well, I think Jeep could have called it something else because back in the 80s, they came up with something called the Scrambler, and it was based on the classic CJ7, which they lengthened and turned into a pickup. But still, I think Gladiator's a cool name nonetheless. Now you may have noticed I have unlimited headroom, and that's because, like the Wrangler, the Gladiator has a detachable roof. And the same goes for the doors too. And in line with classic Jeeps, you could also fold down the windshield as if you're going on a safari excursion. Now, to the interior. Now, despite looking like a rugged and hard-nosed off-roader, there are a surprising amount of luxuries in here, like soft-touch door panels. Of course, the door panel itself is flat to make good use of the room inside. And unlike most vehicles, you don't get door pockets. Instead, you get nets to carry all your gubbins inside. Now, moving along, well, like most cars from the West, the light switches are controlled with a dial. And I see in front of me, well, it's nice to see classic analog gauges again. Of course, that doesn't mean it's totally old school in here because in the middle, in between the two instrument clusters, is a big multi-information display that shows all your relevant information. So right down to your off-road modes, right down to your fuel economy, and even your tire pressures. Now this is a Jeep, so there are a couple of ergonomic quirks here and there. So for example, if you want to turn off or turn on the interior lights, you're not going to find any switches up here. Instead, it's the dimmer switch for the instrument cluster. You turn it down one notch and it turns off the lights. You turn it up one notch and it turns it on. Then you have the audio controls. They're not on the wheel, they're behind the wheel. So your right hand will be for the volume controls and your left hand will be for the next track and radio controls. Now for the dash, and it's pretty old school. It's a pretty slim dash. It's just about this long and it's flat for good measure. Now, when it comes to ergonomics and, well, basically the center console, just about everything has been put here. So you have your audio controls and your climate controls. And even your window switches are here in the center console. Now, this flap houses your media. So you can plug in your USB, your iPhone, stuff like that. And even a USB-C port and an aux jack. And this is one of the few cars left that still comes with a good old-fashioned cigarette lighter. Now below it, you have your off-road auxiliaries. So you have your locking diffs and your sway bar and your off-road plus modes. And what caught my attention was these aux 1, 2, and 3. So apparently that is for other accessories such as winches and stuff like that. So these buttons engage those. Now, true to the classic and rugged theme, you don't get buttons for off-road controls. Instead, you get a good old-fashioned knob down here. And you don't get electromechanical gear selectors in here either. Instead, it's a good old-fashioned lever. Power adjustable seats, forget about it. Now for the infotainment screen, it's one of the easiest to use out there. Simple, well laid out, big fonts, and it's easy to understand. You don't really need an owner's manual to go around it. And it also comes with Apple CarPlay and Android Auto for good measure. So the screen shows your media. So if a phone's plugged in there, it's gonna show, well, if you have an Apple device, the Apple screen, or an Android device, an Android screen. It also comes with Bluetooth, as mentioned. Now the next screen is for your climate control. And what's interesting is it has apps as well. So you go to off-road pages and wait for it to boot. And all the relevant information about off-roading is displayed here. It shows you if your front axles are locked or unlocked, and the same goes for the rear, and even your steering angle and your sway bar status. Now the next screen shows your accessory gauges. So you have your coolant, your oil temp, battery voltage, and even transmission temperature. And the last screen shows, well, it might be a familiar sight for some Pajero owners because it has a pitch and roll screen. So that shows you the angle and the inclination you're on at the moment. Navigation is standard in the Gladiator, but if you plug in your phone, you can choose to use Waze or Google Maps instead. All in all, it's pretty intuitive, easy to use, and all that. And as I mentioned earlier, you don't really need an owner's manual to go around it. And that's what's good about this infotainment system. Now, also in here is another classic off-road vehicle touch, this grab handle. And speaking of grab handle, since this car has no step board, I found it very nice and very kind of Jeep to make these standard, because I'm not a tall person, and honestly I found it a bit of a struggle to get inside here. So that's the front covered. Let's go over to the back. Okay, now I'm back in the shade and here at the back seats. So what do I see? Well, just like the fronts, you get the cargo net door pockets. Well, I can't really call them door pockets now, can I? Storage bins perhaps? So that net theme continues here with the map pockets by the backrests of the front seats. Now for room, well, it's more than enough. It is an American car after all, so that's what you expect from them, right? So legroom is good, footroom good, and headroom, well, definitely more than enough. And if you take off the roof, well, you have an infinite amount of headroom to go about. So the Gladiator perhaps holds the record for having the most USB ports here at the back. Now there are a total of 5. It's because you have two USB-C ports, two USB ports, and a 230-volt socket to go along with it. So that's a total of 5. Just like the front, there are quirks here at the back too. For example, you don't have window switches on the doors. Instead, they're placed here in the middle, just below the AC vents. And the reason why Jeep did that is because the doors are detachable, and that's also the reason why they did the same for the front. Now there are 2 cup holders down here, but Jeep didn't want you to be thirsty while you're traveling in the Gladiator, so they added more cup holders here. Now, it's also a bit of a jungle gym here because of the roll bar, but here's one feature that I missed seeing in pickups, and it's this: the sliding rear window. But that's not all with the back of the Gladiator, because there are some secret compartments to go along with it. Yes, pickups are designed to carry a lot of things, but you're not going to throw all of them at the back. You're not going to put groceries back there now, are you? So the Gladiator comes with a few storage areas, and we start with the one under the seat, and it's as easy as just putting it up. No latches, no nothing to pull. And it's a pretty sizable box underneath here too. And it's so easy to lift, I can do it from this side too for the other side. And there you go. Pretty big box, isn't it? Put it down, and it's set again. The other secret storage spot is behind the backrests, and you're greeted by another net and another storage box underneath. Now before we hit the road, I want to show you this. See, the Gladiator comes with a remote start system. So you simply press the ×2 button in the key fob, ignition, and there you go. Now let's hit the road. Now the Gladiator on the road is a bit of an irony, because when you look at it, you think it's going to be a rough riding experience, but well, I've been driving it for a couple of kilometers now, and well, it feels like, well, a pretty comfortable big SUV rather than a pickup. And that's despite the fact that it's on huge mud terrain tires and, well, Fox shock suspension. Granted, the ride isn't as pliant as the one in the Wrangler. There is a hint of firmness, but it's not uncomfortable. However, that doesn't mean that the Gladiator feels car-like. It is far from it. And when you're driving on pavement, it sort of tends to wander about in between lanes. And that's mainly because of the suspension. It still uses an old school live axle up at the front. So tracking really isn't its best mark, and you constantly find yourself having to adjust the steering wheel just to go into a straight line. Handling clearly isn't the forte of the Gladiator, but come on, just look at it. Would you really bring this thing to a racetrack? Where you should really bring this is to the trail. Now, another thing that surprises me about the Gladiator is that it's relatively quiet. That's not to say it's luxury car levels. It's, well, considering it's got a huge plastic roof and upright doors and stuff like that, it's fairly quiet. And sure, it's got huge square windows and huge square side mirrors, so a bit of wind noise comes in, but it's not as loud as you would expect, especially from something that looks like this. Now, this particular Gladiator is wearing mud terrain tires, so, well, aside from a little wind whistle from the huge square side mirrors, well, there's a fair bit of tire noise seeping into the cabin, but all in all, it's not that bad. Well, if it's something that bothers you, just turn up the volume of the radio a little bit. Now, the Gladiator is powered by a 3.6-liter V6 engine. No turbos here. It's just good old-fashioned displacement. How does it feel? Well, here's the thing. I think it just needs that little bit more torque. And what I find unusual is Jeep didn't put the 2-liter turbo in here. They stuck with the naturally aspirated V6. And curiously, the turbo makes more torque, 400 Newton meters. This makes about 300 something. So when you consider the weight of the vehicle, and it's heavier than the Wrangler and all that, I think it needs a turbo engine. But that's not to say it's slow. It just needs that little bit more prodding of the pedal just to make it go a little bit faster. Now, because it's carrying all that weight and, well, there's a bit of a torque shortage, fuel economy, well, it's not that great. But then again, you expect that from a 3.6 liter V6, don't you? So, out in city driving, it does, well, get ready for this, about 5 kilometers per liter. When the traffic's a little bit lighter, it's about 6.5 kilometers per liter. So, if you're gonna get a Gladiator, well, be prepared to pay for big fuel bills. But then again, you bought a Gladiator, so well, you shouldn't really complain about that, should you? But this is a Jeep, and we all know what you guys might want to see, and that's to go off-road. Now the Gladiator is in its element because we are now off-road, and the weather even made it more interesting for us by making it rain. But slippery grass and wet mud isn't going to slow down the Gladiator. I'm currently in 4-high auto mode right now, and well, Gladiator's taking it pretty well. And I have to say, the Gladiator's pretty comfortable off-road too. I mean, it's got those Fox shocks, so you can take small ruts and bumps at a fair rate of speed. Of course, I'm not telling you to go 40-50 kilometers per hour in dirt, but well, it's handling it pretty well. And for someone who has very little off-road experience, well, the Gladiator just makes things easier. Just leave it in auto, let the car sort everything out for you. Now, the thing about the Gladiator is, well, it's bulk. And now from the front, it's totally fine, but you have to be a little bit more wary when you're hitting the trails, when you're looking out at the back, because again, the Gladiator is about a meter longer than the standard Wrangler Unlimited. So just be a little bit more wary with that. And at the same time, you have to be, well, have to look out a little bit further to see if the Gladiator is going to fit where you're going to put it next. Of course, helping us climb this pretty rocky and slippery slope is, well, the tires. They're, as I mentioned, they're mud terrain tires. So well, stuff like this, it's not going to be much of a problem for it. If anything, it probably doesn't even know it's off-road right now. Probably doesn't even care. And that's the Jeep Gladiator for you folks. On-road, a bit of an oxymoron, being surprisingly comfortable despite the way it looks. But off-road, it's exactly what you expected. It's unburstable, dependable, rugged, and, well, no matter what we threw at it, it just kept on chugging. So, how much for the Gladiator, you ask? Well, this Rubicon version retails for 4,790,000 pesos. And if that didn't give you sticker shock, well, good for you. But just think about it, 4.7, nearly 4.8 million pesos for an off-roader that isn't really even that great on the road. Well, think about this. The Jeep Gladiator is the kind of vehicle that just doesn't care about the negatives, and it's bold, it's brash and all that, and what you see is what you get. And if you're that kind of person, then maybe the Gladiator is just the truck for you. This has been Anton Andres from AutoIndustriya.com. If you enjoyed this video, do subscribe to our YouTube channel, like us on Facebook, and also don't forget to follow us on Instagram and on Twitter as well. Thanks for watching.